The Voyage is a short story by Katherine Mansfield. Set probably in Wellington, New Zealand, as Picton is a tiny coastal town in New Zealand, this short story is from the perspective of a focalized third-person anonymous narrator. Before we dive into the main ideas of The Voyage, first a summary of the short story. Fenella rushed towards the Picton boat alongside Frank, her father, and Grandma on a mild night adorned with starry skies. Fenella sensed her father's agitation. Strapped to her back was the luggage containing her grandma's elegant umbrella with a swan head handle, which incessantly packed her shoulder as if urging her to hasten. Upon their arrival at the old wharf harbor, a whistle from the large boat resonated. Fenella observed the boat, illuminated like a constellation, feeling it belonged more in the sky than the earthly sea. Climbing the gangway with her family, she overheard her father, inquiring about their cabin tickets with a somber tone that couldn't conceal his sadness and fatigue. Witnessing his tender farewell with Grandma surprised Fenella, she turned away, concealing her sorrow. As her father bid her goodbye, Fenella, desperate for reassurance, clutched his lapels, questioning the duration of her absence. Ignoring her, he gently shook her off, leaving her with a shilling. As the boat departed, Fenella strained to see her father on the dock but couldn't. Turning to Grandma, she found solace as Grandma prayed on their luggage. After the prayer, they descended below deck to their small cabin. The stewardess, familiar with Grandma, noticed their morning attire. Grandma attributed their circumstances to God's will, and the stewardess promised to check on them later. In the cramped cabin, they swiftly undressed, with Grandma donning a crocheted headscarf made by Fenella's late mother. Grandma's gentle smile conveyed a shared grief, the headscarf silently commemorating their loss. Shortly, both Fenella and her grandma were prepared for bed, and Fenella was astonished as her nimble grandma ascended to the upper berth. The stewardess checked on them, cautioning about possible boat pitching. Strangely, as the words were uttered, the boat tilted, and water slapped against its sides. Fenella fretted over the possibility of the umbrella falling and breaking. Sharing her concern, Grandma asked the stewardess to lay the swan-neck umbrella flat to prevent damage. After complying, the stewardess engaged in conversation about Fenella's recent loss. Despite being labeled a poor little motherless mite, Fenella paid little attention and soon drifted into sleep. The next morning Fenella observed the harbor emerging through the portside window. Reflecting on the sadness following her mother's death, she hoped for a change in luck as she embarked on a journey to a new life with her grandma. Upon Grandma's awakening, they hastily dressed, leaving the cabin to go up on deck with their luggage. As land gradually approached, Fenella felt the icy wind. The landing stage neared, guided by Mr. Penready, a friend of Grandma's. Once ashore, they found an old horse and cart waiting. Grandma was delighted to see Mr. Penready, who conveyed that Grandpa, Walter Crane, was in good spirits. Fenella and Grandma climbed into the cart, reaching their grandparents' home. Inside, Fenella discovered a white cat in a side room and listened to her grandparents' voices. Grandpa, lying in an enormous bed with a rosy face and silver beard, greeted Fenella warmly. She showed him the swan-head umbrella, and above the bed, a needlepoint made by Grandma hung in a black frame. Grandpa, with a merry smile, suggested Grandma had crafted it, leaving Fenella with the impression that he might have winked at her. The needlepoint text was, "Lost. 1 golden hour. Set with 60 diamond minutes. No reward is offered. For it is gone forever." While the precise age of Fenella Crane remains unspecified, she is presumed to be between 5 and 10 years old based on the text's contextual clues. The character's choice of words, such as referring to her as a child and a motherless mite, indicates her young age. Despite being old enough to comprehend the significance of being sent to live with her grandparents, Fenella is still too young to travel alone. She exhibits keen observational skills, yet her reactions to her surroundings suggest a passive response as if overwhelmed by her circumstances and unable to express her true emotions openly. Notably, during her father's emotional farewell to his mother, Fenella turns away and puts on a brave face while distraughtly gripping his jacket's lapels, revealing her apprehension over leaving home. From the shilling that her father gave her, she deduced that she'd be gone for a long time. The symbolism in the story, particularly the sea representing Fenella's mood, reflects her emotional growth. The dark and mysterious sea at the beginning mirrors Fenella's uncertainty, while the turbulent sea during the night symbolizes her emotional turmoil. As the morning comes and the sea calms, it mirrors Fenella waking to a new day, praying for change. Carrying the swan-necked umbrella on her journey, Fenella's responsibility for it reflects her growing maturity and logical thinking. Her actions, like carefully placing the umbrella in the cabin and later suggesting to lay it flat during the threatening boat tilt, demonstrate her evolving understanding and responsibility. The dialogue, "You've got my dash and yes, Grandma," on the landing dock further signifies Fenella's entry into young adulthood as she takes ownership of caring for the umbrella, fostering a sense of hope and optimism for the future. This leads to the significant idea of being innocent and naive. As the boat gradually moves away from the wharf, Mansfield depicts the scene with the description, "Silently the dark wharf began to slip, to slide," to edge away from them from Fenella and her grandmother's perspective, implying that Fenella perceives the wharf as the moving entity rather than the boat. This interpretation may suggest Fenella's innocence, as she doesn't fully grasp the dynamics of the situation. Another instance highlighting Fenella's innocence is when her grandma appears astonished in Fenella's mind upon discovering the cost of the sandwiches on the boat, hinting that Fenella may not comprehend her grandmother's perspective on the sandwiches being expensive. Moreover, while Mrs. Crane is in the cabin undressing, Fenella struggles to describe her grandmother's clothing. Mansfield notes that Mrs. Crane undid her bodice, and something under that, and something else underneath that. This ignorance about her grandmother's attire highlights Fenella's innocence, as she is too young to discern the specific names of each garment. Her grandma's name, Mrs. Crane's, being associated with a crane used for lifting and moving, may suggest that she is figuratively picking Fenella up from her father's home in Wellington and transporting her to Picton. Over Grandpa's bed hangs a needlepoint featuring a condensed quote commonly attributed to the American educator and reformist, Horace Mann. The complete quote reads, "Lost yesterday, somewhere between sunrise and sunset, 2 golden hours, each set with 60 diamond minutes. No reward is offered, for they are gone forever." Mansfield's inclusion of this quote may signify a reflection on the passage of time and the necessity of letting go of the past and moving on, particularly Fenella's life with her parents and her mother's death. The suggestion is for Fenella to look ahead to the future and move beyond the past, especially now that she is embarking on a new life with her grandparents. While Grandpa, lying in bed and seemingly unwell or bedridden, points out the poem to Fenella, Mr. Penready's earlier remark about finding him in good spirits suggests a contrast. Grandpa, with his silvery white beard visible above the bed sheets, exemplifies old age, while Fenella represents the budding stage of young womanhood. Despite being at opposite ends of life, they share a moment of understanding and camaraderie, recognizing the inescapability of the future and the unalterable nature of the past. The story concludes with a hint of affection as Fenella's grandfather looks at her so merrily she almost thought he winked at her, possibly indicating that, despite her loss, Fenella will find love and support from her grandfather and potentially her grandmother.